It's 9 o'clock and these are the top stories on this special extended edition of Newsnight. President Zuma reveals an ambitious plan to develop infrastructure in a bid to create jobs, all in his fourth State of the Nation address. The president also seeking lower electricity price increases to support economic growth. And President Zuma vowing to boost the performance of the state, including tackling government corruption. The president also announcing a strategy to step up the beneficiation of precious minerals, all in a bid to boost jobs. State of the Nation 2012, South Africa will embark on a massive infrastructure development to boost job creation. In his fourth State of the Nation address, which concluded about an hour ago, President Zuma announced 5 major projects focusing on health and basic education, infrastructure, communication, technologies and regional integration. The strategy will develop an integrated rail and road infrastructure, and it will focus on projects connected to mining and mineral beneficiation. Tackling corruption, as we've headlined, particularly within state institutions, has also been strongly highlighted. Well, throughout President Zuma's State of the Nation address tonight, tweeters and bloggers and the such have been busy in cyberspace, commenting on and analysing the speech in great detail. So what exactly have they been saying? As this special edition of Newsnight continues, we're joined now by 2 media watchers, Vadim Schreiner from Media Tenor and Tim Scheer from Brands Eye, who've been monitoring reaction and response live online. So what exactly have South Africans been saying in real time? Gentlemen, to both of you, a very good evening to you and welcome. I want to get to the guts of what the President said in a short time. But essentially, while we've been watching the speech on our television sets, you've been watching it elsewhere. Tim, what have you actually been doing?
So we've been sitting behind the scenes very quietly, looking at Facebook, looking at Twitter, and seeing what people are saying to the presidency, to the president, around the State of the Nation, around the various hashtags that are coming up about it, and using that information to draw particular insights, essentially putting real-time feedback from the community out there, from the citizens of South Africa, and using that information to see what did they like, what didn't they like, what are the concerns, etc.
And broadly, has there been a lot of activity over the past 2 hours? And perhaps could you make a comparison between this year and previous State of the Nation addresses as we get more and more adept at this kind of technology?
Yeah, it's been absolutely astronomical. Last year we saw about 6,000 conversations coming through. So far in the night, it's certainly not over. We're sitting on about 35,000, which is a 6,000
to 35,000
absolutely
in the space of a year.
Which is more than the South African rugby team got during the World Cup during their games, which, you know, in terms of putting into context, is quite important.
Vadim, what does that say about the state of new technology and new media?
Well, it says quite a lot. First of all, it says that South Africans are very much ready to accept social media. They're very much willing, more than before, as we can go and see, to go and discuss subjects. Now, what's particularly interesting is to note that there's perhaps a preconceived idea that social media is about talking brands, talking fashion, talking, personal items. Now, the fact that we've got an increase from 6,000 to 28,000, an enormous amount, is an indicator that South Africans are in fact willing to go and discuss policy issues, that they're very concerned about what this country is heading to, and that they're taking up that discussion very, very vividly and very openly.
What does that say about South Africans' current feeling about politics and the State of the Nation? We're concerned, no doubt.
I think we're absolutely concerned. I think we've been concerned for a while, just that in the past, without the social media, we not necessarily had an outlet to go and express our opinions. We probably mumbled amongst each other and amongst our friends, but now we actually have got an ability to go and express our opinions, and it makes it even more fascinating to be able to go and see how we South Africans are expressing our opinion in social media, how traditional media, who have in the past directed the discussions and have been expressing their opinion, how that is reflected and what the interaction between those two is, and that's in essence one of the items that we've been doing for the last 2 weeks.
And I want to talk to you about the ramp up over the past fortnight. But Tim, have you been able to gauge a tenure or a tonality as far as the national conversation is concerned tonight? In other words, are we angry? Are we satisfied? Are we happy? How do we feel as a nation?
In broad strokes, leading up to it, we were quite positive. There was a lot of discussion around whether the delivery from last year's State of the Nation had been met. Going into the actual evening itself, the tonality has changed quite a lot, and it's got a lot more negative, which we didn't quite expect, which is obviously interesting to see. The country is certainly not angry, but there are concerns that are raised around certain things that we've been missed out.
What words are being used? How does that negativity manifest itself?
Very broad things. I mean, it's obviously different depending on the consumer that's involved or the citizen that's involved. But a lot of it's more around questions and saying, you've set a particular precedent, can you deliver on it? And questions like, what about the health question? What about health? Have we addressed it enough? Why didn't you address it enough? And also people really bringing it down to the local context and saying, I live in this particular area,
right.
You haven't spoken anything to that particular need. And what does it mean? Where do I fit in as a citizen of South Africa?
All right. Vadim Schreider, a fortnight ago, this whole project started. You were monitoring social media build-up, but also traditional media build-up. By that I mean television, radio and print. Traditional media, what was it saying?
Well, the traditional media are, in general, more the type of media that ask the deeper questions. They're the ones that are criticizing what is going to go and happen. And we saw some really negative headlines over the past couple of days. Now, the State of the Nation address in a context is always a bit of a difficult one. If we're looking at the past couple of years, there's been quite optimism around the State of the Nation address. People have been expecting positive outcomes, and last year in particular there was a very, very big expectation that the President was going to go and make an encouraging speech, which he did, with the focus on employment. This year, however, and perhaps that's a replication of the economic downturn, the mood towards the State of the Nation address in the traditional media has been very negative, a negative 10%, something that we've last seen in 2008 around Thabo Mbeki. So the media, perhaps also, due to some of the issues that government has been facing in the last couple of years, last couple of months with the media, were very, very negative towards the State of the Nation address.
We've just put up a graph which is sentiment ahead of the State of the Nation. Can you talk us through that very quickly?
The line on top indicates the sentiment expressed in social media. The line on the bottom indicates the sentiment expressed in the traditional media. So what you can go and see is that traditional media are very opinionated. They express their opinions Sunday, the 5th of February in particular, where we've got the weekend papers expressing what they want, what they don't want. But generally the tone relatively negative. Now in the social media, one of the things that we're seeing is driven by the high volume. The opinions, of course, more muted, and as Tim has been indicating earlier on, initially a bit positive, but as we are going towards the State of the Nation address, not that positive. And perhaps we can go and move on to the next slide.
Yep, let's have a look at it, if we can get that up. There we go.
And these are the volumes of coverage. You can go and see the large amount of build-up that we've been having prior to the State of the Nation address. In fact, almost every day replicated up to double or triple of the previous days in discussions. And that is a bit interesting, because in the past couple of years we saw the take-up of State of the Nation address only a day, perhaps 2 days before the time, now up to 5 days before the time. Again, an indicator that South Africans, both through traditional media, the journalists, and the social media, are starting to go and be more engaged.
We're looking for answers, and in many cases the country looking for hope as well.
The country is looking hope, but the country's got a lot of questions, because we've had many issues being raised, many promises been made, and hence the people are waiting for the answer. The State of the Nation address is the day when we're getting the answers to our questions.
Tim, I find the initial graph that we put up, and perhaps we can just return to that. You made the point that the traditional media was perhaps more opinionated than what people were saying online. I find that hard to believe. I thought that that there was a lot more opinion, a lot more robust conversation in cyberspace than in pages and on the screen. How do you read that?
So I think the important thing here is that the market tends to be quite divided on these things. So you have as much positive as you have negative, which gives us the sort of graph that we got. So you're having the two of them sort of neutralizing each other out. So typically you do have people responding to particular situations and having very negative responses, as well as having very positive responses, as well as these interesting discussions that take place across these two divides. And I think it's the fact that it's quite broad, which is resulting in a very stable graph.
Okay, I don't want to spend too much time reflecting on what's been happened. I want to talk about what's happened tonight. But very quickly, Vadim Schreider, was there any overlap in the run-up to the State of the Nation between traditional media and new media as far as the issues are concerned?
Yeah, we've got some interesting trends which surprised us quite a bit. The big focus that we had, and perhaps we can get the chart and the background to go and show it to us as well, is that we had a very much overlap between traditional media and social media on the issue around job creation.
Right, there we go.
There we go, we have it, yeah. Also an overlap on the issue around education, and an overlap on the issue around health. So very clearly, those are the three themes that the traditional media we're running, as well as the social media we're concerned about. Big focus, job creation, health, big concern, and education. Some of the other issues have got a discrepancy. Print media and traditional media focusing more on business economy. It's of course not something, the same thing.
It's effectively bread and butter issues versus policy issues.
It's the personal issues, the issues that are reflective of what people are thinking, what people individually are fearing, and those, in fact, are the ones that we're seeing in both of the incidents.
All right, so what have South Africans been saying tonight as far as the 2012 State of the Nation address is concerned? We'll have more from Vadim and Tim in just a moment on this special edition of Newsnight.
You want life insurance, right? Affordable life insurance. Be careful, it can mean hidden fees, called initiation fees. But Clientele Life asks no upfront fees. Up to 5 million rand cover straight up. And it includes disability cover of up to 5 million rand.
Great.
And critical illness cover of up to 3 million rand. Simple. SMS us and we'll call you back.
Thank you.
Clientele Life. For you.
If you were born without hope, you wouldn't have to try anything new. There'd be no need to set any goals. No facing the unknown. You could just do what you do for another year. No heart pounding in your chest or blood rushing to your head. You'd have no stories to tell. Nothing to look back on. Nothing that says, I have lived. Start with what you hope for. With Sanlam.
Well, Newsnight continues. Welcome back. And for the very first time ever, a team of analysts here on the station have tracked online citizen reaction, your reaction, my reaction to the State of the Nation speech. Let's continue to track response tonight and reintroducing my guests, Vadim Schreiner from Media 10 along with Tim Scheer from Brands Eye. Let's talk now about one of the big issues as far as the State of the Nation is concerned. President Zuma saying money invested must leave behind more than just physical infrastructure. That was his big focus tonight.
Compatriots, the massive investment in infrastructure must leave more than just power stations, rail lines, dams and roads. It must industrialize the country, generate skills and boost much needed job creation.
Well, certainly the year of infrastructure, and as our analyst in Cape Town, Karima Brown, was telling my colleague Nikiba Bakicha a little earlier, it looks like South Africa over the next couple of years is going to become Crane City. Tim Scheer, back to you. The focus was infrastructure, with the tweets reflecting that.
It's a very interesting one, actually, because there wasn't a huge amount of focus of it in terms of the conversation and the social media conversation from the public on it. I think a large reason for that is that it's not something that's here and now and very tangible and very immediate to us, the citizens of South Africa. So, you saw a much stronger response from some of the other themes. I think while infrastructure is important, I don't think there's a tangible, immediate feedback loop on it, which is why I think there wasn't as big a conversation about it as there could have been. There certainly was information, but it wasn't really condensed around a particular topic. There wasn't much debate around the topic and the importance and the relative importance of it. So from that perspective...
that utterly surprises me, because the entire, the entire 30 minutes of an hour speech was devoted to infrastructure, yet we as online citizens seem to have missed that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there was certainly discussion about it, but it didn't kind of come to a head where there was a very clear focus of what the discussion was around. So across a lot of the themes we saw it, that people certainly spoke about it, but they didn't ever really come to a point where they were very clear on exactly what it meant, there wasn't this cross discussion between the different people in the conversation. So it tended to be a reporting on the discussion and reporting on the State of the Nation rather than a discussion among the citizens.
But Vadim, this is early reaction, isn't it? So again, perhaps as we start to digest what the President has said, as we start to look down at some of the build projects that he's announced, maybe the tweets, particularly regionally, will become a little bit more cerebral, perhaps.
Yeah, I expect that's going to go and be the case, and we saw similar sentiments in the previous years, where there's also been quite an intense focus on infrastructure, where there's a lot of information, there's a lot of details, there's a lot of data that's been put forward, and that needs to be digested. I mean, there's been information about, Transnet, there's been information about ports and others. People will go and start thinking, what does it mean? People are going to go and think, what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my province? Is this an opportunity? So I suspect that, in the next 2 to 3 days, there will be more discussion about it, but it's obviously not something that entices an immediate reaction, which is something that we would have probably measured in the social media.
Tim, I've got a theory. Maybe just to hashtag the word infrastructure is too much PT.
Quite possibly, quite possibly.
What were people saying about infrastructure? Again, let's put the 2 tweets up that we've received so far, that we've captured. We can put them back on the screen. But there we go. Are they fairly positive or fairly negative? In broad terms, I'm not referring to those 2 in particular, but generally, were people, those who commented on infrastructure, were they buoyed by it?
Yeah, as I say, without a very particular focus, the sentiment was very much neutral. So you have people talking positively, people talking negatively, but because there wasn't anything from the consumer perspective that was really groundbreaking and kind of really stepping forward, it meant that there was nothing to condense the sentiment around. So what you typically find, and we see this with a lot of our clients, particularly across the rest of Africa, is that a brand will do a particular action and that'll condense the conversation around that particular theme and that particular topic. And as they do that, everyone else then follows suit and focuses on that particular angle. So we didn't see that happening here around infrastructure in particular, which means we have a very broadly neutral sentiment towards it.
Is broadly neutral good or bad, Vadim?
Well,
let's make no mistake that the politicians will be looking at cyber reaction to the speech.
They probably will, but we must also remember that the State of the Nation address is not just for the people of South Africa. It's also for the investors outside of the country. It's for the business people. It's for those that are looking for opportunities. So they're the ones who perhaps not at this point of time are going to be expressing their opinions in the social media, but they're the ones that are going to be quite closely following that particular information and enjoying their conclusions. So as much as we perhaps don't get that type of feedback in the social media, I'm sure that there is certain groups, perhaps the next couple of days through blogs or through other news sites, that are going to be expressing their opinion as they are dissecting that one. It's perhaps not a Twitter topic, but I'm sure in the next couple of days it's going to be a topic that the social media in general outside of Twitter are going to go and be discussing. As
a matter of interest, Tim, do you monitor whether this reaction is purely from South Africa, or do you have international and African reaction to it as well? I mean, to Vadim's point, that investor sentiment is critical in terms of this whole process.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We can discern between the two, and we haven't done so yet. It happened a couple of minutes ago. So we haven't yet done that analysis, and we will be doing it over the next couple of days.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely we can. So, we often do it around some of our clients. We will say, what's happening in Egypt versus South Africa versus another country, and how do those messages differ based on the information that they're receiving?
What specific words were trending as far as Sona is concerned?
As far as Sona was concerned, it was the general themes. So the main things that came through were obviously infrastructure came through, health came through very lightly, education came through very, very strongly, and employment came through incredibly strongly. And if we can see on the graph there, what we've tracked here is we've looked at how much conversation was coming through at a particular time around each of these themes. So if we look, we can see as employment kicked in, the conversation didn't peak quite yet. Infrastructure kicked in, didn't spike that much. And I think the two of those together caused quite a big spike, which we see at around 19.
I'm interested in the one which says when he referred in his speech and he spoke Zulu. What does that tell us?
Well, I think it's an interesting one from a social media perspective and from a digital perspective. There's still not a huge amount of conversation taking place outside of English in South Africa, despite the multiple languages that are happening here. So we see that English has become the sort of language of the internet across South Africa, across broad regions, with probably the exception of the Middle East and a couple of small European countries. So I think a lot of the crowd was lost. So we can see when we look there, you can see there's a big downturn when you start speaking Zulu. We can also see...
Is that just indicating a lack of interest in the topic, or a lack of understanding, or have people just popped out for a cup of tea?
Well, it could be any of those things, and it's too early to tell. But what we can see is that people talk based on the things that kind of give them the knee-jerk response. That is what social media is. You give them a particular stimulus, and they're going to respond in a particular way based on what they're seeing. So my view is that people are just tuning out. They're not understanding it, or a large portion aren't understanding it, or certainly not knowing how to respond and use that information. So they're tuning out and they're not driving as much conversation.
Fadib, in many ways, this is going to alter the way in which political speech writing is developed as we enter this new age. Is that you've got to hit those hot buttons, and you've got to hit them consistently, and the time period has got to condense.
I think this is probably one of the most interesting outcomes of this experiment that we've been doing, where we didn't know ourselves how it's going to go and pan out. Now, if we're looking at the information that Tim has showed to us just now, we can actually go and pinpoint almost by the minute, by the 30 seconds, to what extent a certain issue found a reaction, irrespective of what reaction, and which ones were. Now, this is an extremely useful tool to be able to go and start building speeches. If you want to go and build a speech, you want to go and build up momentum. You're going to have down periods in a speech, you're going to go and have highlights in a speech. Now, what we can go and see from this one is if it's been successful to go and draw attentions and comments, or if it hasn't. Now, in this particular speech, I think the jury is slightly mixed, is slightly out, and I think we can also go and see that from the fact that the actual topics that were addressed in the speech, and perhaps we can go and get that slide also in the back of us, where we can go and see that the issues that the president addressed, yes, we can go and see them now. Yeah, that's the one that we were looking for. If we focused on infrastructure, that's the one that he mentioned the most. And he spoke about job creation, he spoke about education, he spoke about social policies. Now, if we remember what the expectations were,
let's marry this graph to the build-up and the expectations.
Now, the expectations were very clearly about job creation. Yeah. The second big expectations were about education. Then we had health. Then we had crime. So what we're seeing here, and we've actually done the calculations, that in this particular speech, it actually, compared to the last 5 years, matched the least the expectations of the people. And some of the issues that we found that President addressed in the previous years,
the expectations.
The least.
So if you were to say, is the speech a success or not in terms of public expectation, it wouldn't necessarily be that.
Well, it's a double-sided sword, because the president doesn't just go and speak to what the people are expecting, but he also speaks to various communities and various groups. And it's, of course, his platform to be able to go and get across the issues that he considers as being important. And in terms of giving the direction, so it does not necessarily need to go and be a direct response. However, there is a couple of issues that in the previous speeches contained that people liked. A focus on, for instance, small, medium enterprises, a focus on entrepreneurship, a focus on service delivery. We did not see them getting across that much. And again, these are issues that are close to go on people's hearts. So it's going to go and be interesting also to go and see in the next couple of days to what extent the fact that the president focused so much on infrastructure, a non-people's issue, and not that much, for instance, on health, education to a certain extent, what the reaction is going to go and be. I'm a bit cautious. I'm really not sure which direction it's going to turn.
Tim, what about the hidden issues? And this has also been referred to by some tweeters. Nationalisation, crime, I think, was peripherally mentioned, if not at all. And the other one, of course, is the Protection of Information Bill. There is huge public discourse around that, yet scant attention given to it in the speech. What do you make of that?
I think crime in particular is a very interesting one, because there was a strong build-up before the event and before the speech itself. And there was commentary throughout the night, but it wasn't huge. It was very, very low comparatively.
What were people saying?
All sorts of things. So people were complaining that the crime in their area got worse. They were commenting on particular situations where they just didn't feel that enforcement was done
But
strong
aren't these
enough.
the normal Twitter whingers?
Well, yes and no. You know, people are sharing their experiences which are happening around them all the time. I think the difference is that State of the Nation condenses that and focuses that and gives them an opportunity that if they're going to talk, other people can engage with them on that same topic.
Do you have a sense of who exactly has been active? Do you have a sense of the demographic?
I will have it. We don't have it quite yet, but it's certainly
perhaps
something
more
we can
broadly, who in South Africa is active on Twitter? I mean, one senses it's upwardly mobile people with access to mobile technology. That doesn't represent, I think, the vast swathe of the South African population. So surely, you know, it's interesting to talk about this, but ultimately your results are completely skewed.
Well, it depends how you look at it.
You're going to say yes and no, aren't you?
I feel under pressure, but it's a very interesting one, because you're sitting in a position where social media is growing at 300% a year.
At
300% a year.
300%
So you're going at tremendous rate. So even though it's
and
not
that's
representative
across the population.
across the South African population, we're also seeing that as mobile grows, we're seeing a larger penetration of lower LSM, the poorer of South Africa getting involved. There was a research I came across a couple of days ago which found that over 80% of people who are online are in social media. So it's getting representative very, very quickly. And we're seeing this across our data. So it used to be the case that it used to be kind of the leading edge, upper class, the wealthy who are able to actually engage. And we're seeing this change completely. We're seeing very distinct types of conversations. So the affluent on the one side are having a very different type of conversation to the poor on the other side. And then you've got very key influences sitting in between, somebody like a DJ Fresh, for example, mediating the conversation between these two different streams. But it is becoming increasingly more representative, particularly over the last
we've got
6
about
months.
2.5, 3 minutes left before we close this. The analysis has been interesting and insightful. Vadim Schreiner from Media Tenor, back to you. What's the big takeout then tonight from the Twitterverse?
There's some interesting takeaway. Again, from my point of view, researching mostly the traditional media, and this as a first experiment to be able to go and see to what we can go and get out of social media. It is interesting that the conversations in the traditional media are to a certain extent overlapping, but that there is on certain issues also a big gap where it isn't. So the questions that traditional media have to go and ask themselves are we actually delivering the content that people really would like to go and talk about? They are not. So the interaction between traditional media, setting the agenda, something that we know traditionally has always happened, to social media picking up a conversation, is going to go and have quite a big impact on the media industry that is struggling to go and deal with social media, struggling to go and deal with revenues and others, and becoming more and more relevant.
So what you're also saying to me is if tomorrow morning's newspaper headlines don't reflect what we've seen on Twitter tonight, there's an issue of disconnect which the traditional media houses need to be concerned about.
I'm expecting, in fact, that kind of disconnect to go and happen tomorrow. Journalists, as we saw in our previous discussion, were far more critical, had expectations. Social media, not that much. I'm expecting that. Now, it doesn't mean the one have to go and reflect the others, but I think that traditional media do have to go and look at what is it that the conversations are on the social media and cater more for it.
Tim Shea, I'll give you the last word. Give us your big takeout tonight.
So my big takeout is that there's been tremendous growth and that the market and the community are very interested in the topic, although not necessarily informed in how to engage with it. So there's a certain education element to being able to be politically informed, if that's the right way to put it. So they're certainly engaging with it, they're very interested in it, and they're sharing that information, but they're not sure how to engage with the particular topics and the particular points of interest and the particular themes that we've discussed tonight. So my big takeout is that there's a massive role in educating the community, educating the population in how to behave and how to engage with this material.
But having said that, there is massive enthusiasm.
Incredible enthusiasm, but it's not able to debate the topics at the sort of depth that we would require. And it's a simple case of education, I think.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating insights, and I guess my big takeout is you've heard what these two guys have had to say, so back and start tweeting and see if you can change the trends. A big thanks tonight to Vadim Schreiner from Media Tenor, along with Tim Shea from brandseye.com. That's a wrap of our in-depth coverage and analysis of the 2012 State of the Nation Address. Tonight's edition of the Tech Report, a quick program note, will be a little later than usual. You can catch that program at 10:30 tonight. Up next, a full news bulletin, including a wrap of the day with Mabali Maloy. Good night from me and the rest of the team.